Hey everybody, my name is Russ. I'm a cartoonist based in Phoenix, Arizona, and I just had the privilege of catching the documentary Frank Miller, American Genius, as it aired in CineMark theaters across the country tonight, June 10th, as I record this. And I just wanted to record some knee-jerk reactions to the film if you're a fellow comic book fan, Frank Miller fan, and you didn't get to see the documentary yet. I hope that it finds a home on a streaming service because first and foremost, it is a very well done documentary. The cinematography in parts is absolutely beautiful. You see Frank around the world getting celebrated for his work, and that's really cool. That's actually the first thing I wanted to talk about as a takeaway from the film. So often in the arts, especially in comics, we celebrate the legacy of creators after they're gone, once they've passed. And the fact that Frank participated in the making of this documentary and got to watch it with fans virtually across the country tonight is super cool. It's really nice to celebrate a seminal artist like Frank while he's still alive. So that's something I took from the documentary right away is, in the film he was humble. It wasn't like he built himself up as this incredible creator. In fact, the filmmakers let other artists do that for him, while he did dwell at times on his shortcomings, his humble beginnings, getting berated by Neil Adams at the beginning of his career, Stan Lee kind of saying you weren't ready for prime time yet, Frank. So the fact that we got to experience this with him in real time, again, very cool. The instant lesson is, if there are any creators that are still with us that you appreciate and love, let them know. Social media, personal message, whatever it takes, because there will be a time when it's too late. So that's my first and foremost takeaway from Frank Miller, American Genius. My journey with Frank, just as an interlude, is in the early 90s, I was a young comic book fan shopping comic book stores around the valley here in Phoenix. And I discovered at like a secondhand bookstore or something, The Dark Knight Returns Volume 3. Now, I had never encountered The Dark Knight Returns before, so I picked up that book primarily because of its striking cover with Carrie Kelly against the bat signal, presumably projected against a wall. I didn't know who that red-headed Robin was, but I certainly could relate. And I didn't know what this old Batman was all about. If you remember that third volume, it starts with him dressed up as the frumpy old lady in the 7-Eleven, and he stops Joker's pre-Harley Quinn female crony that has the swastika, let's just say, a body art, and I had no idea what I was reading. It seemed very mature to my 10, 11-year-old mentality. I had just been reading, your standard off-the-shelf superhero stuff, so that was brand new to me. Later on, when I was in high school, my speech and debate coach, Mr. Martin, let me borrow his collection of The Dark Knight Returns. So I got to read the whole story for the first time. I had read Volume 3, I understood it as kind of a standalone, but then in the context of Volumes 1, 2, and 4, wow, what an epic, to the point where I immediately went to probably a Barnes & Noble, bought my own volume that I still have. You can see how well read it is. It's an annual read for me for sure. And I have other copies and versions of it as well, but that's the one I always kind of go to, the original. And I just wanted to see for my own satisfaction if I had the Warner Books insignia, but it's just the DC Comics there. Young Frank on the back, since we're talking about the guy. So I knew Frank from his Batman work, Year One later, then Daredevil, very much into the superhero stuff. I get into college, I start reading Sin City, mind blown again, and Frank just has kind of had that impact on culture. And what we as readers experience with him, as far as he did this, he did this, I think mainstream audiences have that experience with him as well, where you kind of go back and realize how many of the Batman films are influenced by this work. The Daredevil Netflix show has influence from from his Daredevil run, to the point where, the Disney Plus series Born Again, that's his title. Sin City, 300, work on Netflix. I mean, it keeps going. for both us comic book fans that know this work a little bit more intimately, and then again, a mainstream kind of general audience. So going into this documentary, I figured it was going to be something that was for us comic book fans, that it wouldn't have been as mainstream. I thought it'd be kind of inside baseball. And so my second takeaway is a criticism that they dwelt a little too much on the successes of the Sin City film. There's a good chunk of this documentary that looks like it could have been pulled from Sin City DVD supplemental material, where you have Jessica Alba and Rosario Dawson and Robert Rodriguez just really praising Frank, and rightfully so, but I feel like that stuff is better suited to a Sin City DVD commentary, and a documentary like this has the opportunity to dwell more on some struggles, challenges, failures, like Frank's work on The Spirit cinematically, a little bit more on his controversial political opinions. They touch on these things, but not quite enough to the point where I feel like we as artists watching this documentary got the lessons that Frank learned from those challenges. In other words, like when Frank read the reviews of The Spirit after coming out of successes like Sin City, how did he integrate that into what his next projects were going to be? Was he in any way daunted by that critical failure? And the doc doesn't offer those answers, and I kind of wish that it did, that it was a little bit more comprehensive in those areas versus just the successes, the cinematic successes and adaptations and so on. My third takeaway from this documentary is it dwelt very little, really not at all, on Frank's love life. And I'm going to say this, that's none of our business. That is his personal life that I don't want to see sensationalized, or I don't want people to kind of make that into a tabloid thing. But considering how he depicts women in his work, powerful, strong, but oftentimes abused, seeking redemption, justice, revenge, and then you see these women and they're strong characters, but they're also dressed in a very vulnerable way, let's say. Where does that mentality come from? And I feel like just a shallow exploration of Frank's love life. We heard about his family, his move to New York, his relationships with fellow creators. There was just a blind spot there as far as the origins of Frank's depictions of women in that way. And obviously the actresses that have portrayed these characters in Sin City and so on, they are honored to have been in those roles. So again, what is it about Frank's personality when he presents these archetypes to the actresses? They're like, they kind of see past the sexualization and the lurid visual imagery, and they see to the core of these characters. How does Frank present that in a way that's indicative of what he thinks of women overall? Again, don't want to make his personal life my business, but I just felt like that was a blind spot in a documentary that was chronicling his overall legacy. And then, of course, the elephant in the room, my fourth takeaway, is Frank talks about his alcoholism. Like I said, he does dwell in humility quite a bit. As much as the doc kind of celebrates his achievements, he spends a poignant moment on how the alcoholism could have been the death of him. He calls it a slow suicide, but then also a fast suicide. Like it transitioned at some point to where the roller coaster track was completely down, and he was pummeling, kind of plummeting into this darkness, and then it just kind of cuts to he got better, and that's awesome. I'm glad that he did, but we as fans have certainly noticed his physical changes, the stature, his limp, and so on. I don't want to sensationalize those things. I don't want to exploit those things, but an explanation in the context of what are lessons we fellow artists can learn from that period in his life. And now that he's come out of it and he's creating again and he's partnering with the likes of Dan DiDio and stuff, how he got to this point now is as much a part of his American genius as anything else. That redemption, that overcoming addiction. The celebration of, I was talking to my friend about this, the celebration of the starving artist, the Hemingway, the Bukowski with the bottle of booze in their hand, and the struggle. And, it sounds like Frank was going through that, and that's romanticized. People sometimes pursue that aspect of the artist's experience as an achievement. And the fact that he came out of the other end of that and speaks ill of what he went through, I just would have liked to hear a little bit more about that. That's all. Overall, if you have a chance to catch Frank Miller, American Genius, please do, because despite these little oversights in the documentary, these criticisms actually are so small in the context of how amazing the documentary is, again, cinematically, as a narrative of Frank's life, and as a creator especially, an inspiration to see that the guy's still at the drawing board. To hear his pen, his quill scratch on the canvas at parts in that film, truly emotional. The guy that did this in 1986 is still with us, still kicking, still making work that people are finding relevant, at least to the point where they're creating a documentary about him, right? Producing a documentary. So, super grateful that I had a chance to catch this in the theater. It's funny, my friends and I were talking about this documentary a couple of weeks ago, like, where is it? Where can we see it? And then, just coincidentally, we saw the news of this CineMark screening. So, sometimes that stuff in the zeitgeist manifests itself, and I'm certainly grateful for it. So again, if you have a chance to catch this in any capacity in the future, I highly recommend it, especially if you're a comic book creator, also if you're a comic book fan, also if you're just somebody that's interested in an artist's journey, where they come from, where they're going in their later years. It's truly an inspiration and lives up to the title American Genius, in that it's an American story. Kid does good, achieves dream of making comics. He says it himself in the film, and I know he said it in other interviews, so there's no spoiler here. At 5 years old, he proclaimed, "I'm going to be a comic book creator." And so he is. It's really just that simple. And as simple as it is, it's genius. And as genius as it is, it's simple. So thank you, CineMark. Thank you to the production company that made this documentary. Thank you, Frank, for a lifetime of work. And if you enjoy this commentary enough, come back to my channel, Karaoke Fanboy TV. I open toys every week and talk a little bit about the comics and zines that I make as well. So thank you very much, and I'll catch you next time.